Hello, friends and neighbors, and welcome back to my 20-year Philippine experience. We're going to continue with our second video in the series of Philippines legends and lore. And I've got to tell you, this is one of the scariest things that you're ever going to hear about in the Philippines. It's called an Aswang. Now, some people say they don't exist, but believe it or not, a huge number of people here in the Philippines believe in them very seriously. And tonight we're going to go into what they are, where they're from, the history, the types of beings that these are. It's kind of broad, and it will definitely open your eyes. So the next time a Filipino wants to tell you about an Aswang, you'll have an idea what they're talking about. These things are not nice. So we're going to get into it this evening. But before we do, we got to do the honors. Let's roll it. Okay, friends, let's get into this. What is an Aswang anyway? Well, there's a lot of different definitions because this is the word Aswang has been used to describe a lot of very nasty things in Philippine legend and lore. But according to Maximo Ramos, if I can say his name properly, an Aswang represents a multitude of various Filipino supernatural creatures. And primarily these creatures can be organized into 5 general categories. A vampire, 1. The Viscera sucker, which sounds like a breed of leech. Viscera sucker. The were-dog because, of course, naturally in some places they have werewolves. In Africa they have were-tigers. In the Philippines we don't have a lot of wolves, we don't have a lot of tigers, so were-dog would probably be your 3rd category. Your 4th category would be the typical witch, which can be considered an Aswang. And of course your 5th category, which is a ghoul. Now, all of these things have one thing in common. They're evil, they're mean, and you don't want any part of them. Okay. The vampire typically disguises itself as a beautiful woman, and it lives on a diet of blood, naturally, which is similar to the vampires in the West. Okay, you've seen Dracula. The difference is that it doesn't suck blood by using fangs, where it would bite you. It has a long tongue, which acts as a straw, and it can suck your blood through the tongue. One of the things it loves to do, and this is, I think, the tick-tick version of the Aswang, is that it will tend to eat unborn babies directly from the mother's womb, which is why so many women in the Philippines might say that they had a miscarriage. They would attribute it to an Aswang. Or they have a lot of different traditions for warding it off, which we'll get into in a little while. But either way, it's a beautiful woman, and it doesn't tend to live in tombs. Sometimes they live in the forest, far away from human communities, but it can infiltrate the human society by means of marrying into the community. That's one way. And, of course, naturally, they would be slowly draining their husband's blood. That sounds a lot like my ex. Anyway, she's not in this video, so don't worry about it. Or they might be moving into the human community and pretending to be normal, average, everyday people when you might see them during the day in their weakened state. And then go raid in other villages or go feast somewhere else during other times so as not to raise suspicion in the place where they live, so that they can kind of keep their cover. And of course, one example of the vampire Aswang is in Tagalog it's called the Mandurugo, and I'll try, I will try to pronounce Philippine words and the Tagalog words as best I can. And this is said to live in the region of Capiz. In Capiz, this is actually referred to in many cases as the hometown of the Aswang, and there's several reasons for that, which we'll get into. But that would be the vampire version. The second version would be the Viscera Sucker. Viscera Sucker. Now, this one in Tagalog is referred to as the Manananggal. Okay, now it has a different diet. It eats internal organs and phlegm discharged from sick people. Kind of gross. You know, naturally, we're not I'm not going to put a video of that on here because nobody wants to see something like that. But it also consumes its food with its tongue, which is long and tubular, and not pointed like a vampire. By day, of course, it can take the shape of an attractive, light-skinned, long-haired woman, but by night, it grows wings and segments itself. It can leave its body behind from the waist downward. Try to imagine that. So if you see a beautiful woman, but she seems to be only half there, yeah, probably she could work in a topless bar. You know, as an Angeles, you know, there's a couple of places where they can probably get away with that. You know, just tie a skirt around the bottom and nobody would notice. But nevertheless, of course, it takes great care in hiding its lower half. I could imagine it would, because probably it would want that later. But anyway, with its top half, it can fly searching for its victims. It's particularly attracted to fetuses growing inside pregnant women. And the Viscera suckers are said to live in domiciles deep in the jungle. Of course, and if not the trees themselves. But like the vampire Aswang, they can infiltrate human communities via marriage. And of course, naturally, the last thing you want to do is marry my ex, or marry an Aswang. The next one would be the were-dog, which we mentioned a minute ago, and Maximo Ramos refers to this were-dog, though the creature does not necessarily transform into a dog. Bear that in mind. Ramos went about explaining that the were creature is named after their most ferocious creature. As an example, in Europe we have, and in America we have werewolves. And as I mentioned, they have were tigers and were leopards in Africa and in India, and the Philippines has no indigenous. There's no wolves here, so that's why they would use a were dog as a more appropriate term for their scary were creature, as it would be. Like the other Aswang that we've mentioned so far, the were-dog can infiltrate villages and turns into the creature by night, around midnight. You know, who's heard of that before, right? And then the were-dog then kills and eats people, particularly, once again, preying on pregnant women who are on the road at night. And those women who do not let their long hair hang loose. Okay? If they let their hair hang loose, it's to protect themselves from Aswang. Okay, so pregnant women who tie up their hair are in particular danger if they're on the road at night. The were-dog is said to develop a taste for human flesh by eating food that's been spat on or licked by another were-dog. Okay, the same is said of the Viscera sucker. Unlike the previous Aswang, the were-dog does not infiltrate human communities through marriage, but usually it will infiltrate as a traveler of some sort. So it might show up, as a vagrant or a peddler or a laborer, a day laborer, construction, whatnot. So they tend to portray themselves as a traveler, and of course, They need to travel because naturally they can't stay in one place for very long because they tend to eat themselves out of house and home, as it would be. Now, of course, our fourth option, we can look up the Tagalog word kulam on this one, is an aswang that is characterized, of course, by the witch, extreme vindictiveness, and it tends to lay curses upon those who have upset them in some way, and they can cause certain objects to come out of the person's bodily orifices, such as rice, bones, or even insects. So imagine insects coming out of someone's orifices. They tend to live on the outskirts of towns and villages. Witches in the Philippines are feared, they're avoided, and they're hated, as well deserved. And they can also become a witch can also become an aswang, but only if they have certain qualities that follow an aswang already. Then they can become an aswang, and by doing so, their powers become even stronger than other witches that you might find around. If an aswang is caught, they are to be immediately killed without question. That's just a general rule here in the Philippines. Don't be an aswang, and if you catch an aswang, you've got to get rid of it pretty much straight away. And there are certain ways you can do that, and we'll get on with those directly. I don't recommend actually doing any of these things to anyone you suspect of being an aswang, even if you did happen to date my ex-wife. But there we go. Though with witches there is a complete avoidance by the people, and people are agreed to regard them with a high degree of fear, obviously. Though if an incident were to happen near the witch's residence, then there is reason to turn to the witch, to blame them and punish them for the perceived injustice that took place near their house. The fifth and final class of aswang is what we would call a ghoul. Now, a ghoul aswang are described as humanoid, but generally hidden. What do they eat? They eat human bodies, corpses, carrion eaters, as you say, kind of like vultures. Their nails and their teeth are really sharp and strong, to help, of course, with the stealing and consumption of dead bodies. And their diet, of course, makes them smell really, really bad. And it's rumored that they gather in trees near cemeteries because they like to exhume and consume flesh after the burials. Naturally, we're not going to put any videos or pictures of that. But suffice it to say, of these 5 different types of aswang, all of them are nasty, mean, evil, and resemblant of my ex-wife. Okay, so suffice it to say, aswang are motivated by evil. There's no such thing as a nice aswang. You don't want to marry an aswang, you don't want to live next door to an aswang, and these things are known to be very voracious in whatever setting that you might happen to find one in. And aswang are, of course, described to be unclean, and when they do eat humans, they favor raw human meat. And they tend to be, in Philippine legend and lore, an aswang is typically the opposite of everything virtuous that Philippine society promotes. So you might say that the aswang is the photographic negative of everything that's treasured in Philippine society. And of course, depending on the region you're in, they would have different rumors and myths and legends which would dictate what type of aswang is more prevalent in that area. Now, what do you do? What are the countermeasures? If you're in the presence of an aswang, how do you know if if someone is an Aswang, there's a couple of ways. Unfortunately, the ways of detecting an Aswang are rather sketchy. One way is to look into their eyes. Now, the problem with looking into their eyes is that you have to be pretty close up. I mean, how many inches from their face, right? And frankly, I don't get a chance to see my reflection in many people's eyes because I don't tend to be that close to many people. Call it a psychological defect. But nevertheless, if you were to look into the eyes of an Aswang, they say that your reflection is inverted. So in their eyes, if you see yourself and you see yourself upside down, oh, there you have an Aswang. Okay? The other way to tell if someone is an Aswang by detection is to bend down and look behind you between your legs. And if you do this, you will see the Aswang in a different shape or a different form than you would see them if you looked at them standing up straight and regular. How you would justify to the passerby bending down and looking backward between your legs is another story. I would have a hard time with that myself, and I don't like to walk around, frankly, with my head down between my legs looking behind me. However, if you did happen to do that, let's say you dropped, you bent down to tie your shoes and you took a glance, then you might spot an Aswang because they would be different looking than if you were standing up straight. So, all right, now let's get on to the countermeasures. There are several remedies that you can use to get rid of Aswang or even kill an Aswang. And again, I don't recommend killing on this channel in any stretch of imagination. But it depends on the culture and the significance of the tools that you're using. For example, holy objects. They don't tend to like blessed items. Crosses, crucifixes, holy water, this sort of thing. They don't. They want to stay away from that. They don't tend to like salt. So again, if you see someone sprinkling salt around their door, this could be to keep an Aswang away. Aswang don't like that kind of thing, which means that not only do they eat humans, but they eat them in a very bland condition because naturally you would want to put salt on that, I would imagine. I don't know. Maybe I've just been in the kitchen too long. Anyway, they don't eat salt. They don't like ash, so you could use ash. They don't like the tail of stingrays. Okay. Yeah, I can think of a lot of people who don't like the tail of stingrays, especially who was that Australian explorer that time? I think I really liked watching him, Steve something. Yeah, he didn't like the tail of stingrays either. Apparently nobody does. They don't like large crustaceans. What's that? A giant crab? A giant lobster? So anyway, I guess if you're having a big lobster dinner, the Aswang would not want to show up to that, and that would be a big clue right there. They don't like vinegar. Okay, and whatever it is, it says here, beetle, B-E-T-E-L, nut chew. Beetle nut chew. They don't like that. I'm not sure I like that either, but I'm not an Aswang, so don't come after me. And they also don't like urine. And again, who does? I don't know. There's a couple of things here that are kind of sketchy. They say that one thing you can do to avoid having an Aswang entering into your house is to place a ladder against your house, but put it backward. So that is a countermeasure against Aswangs. So, that's how you keep these pleasant little things away. Now, because Aswangs are believed to cause miscarriages, countermeasures to develop, countermeasures to drive Aswang away and prevent them from prowling during childbirth, of course, have been developed. One method, and naturally, this happens if the husband tends to drink a lot, is for the husband of the childbearing wife to remain under the house, naked, while furiously waving a sword. And, right. Yeah, I can't see myself naked under the house waving a sword. I don't know how much beer it would take to cause that to happen. But nevertheless, that would tend to drive away Aswang. It would also tend to drive away neighbors, in-laws, children, relatives, salesmen, technicians, cable installers. I can think of a lot of people that would be driven away by a naked man under the house waving a sword. So, okay, suffice it to say, it would drive away Aswang as well. Now, what they should do is, obviously, in a lot of Philippine homes, especially in the province, there's a lot of space between the bamboo floorboards. They stick sharp sticks or bolos through those spaces to prevent an Aswang from lurking underneath the house. And, of course, I guess that kind of makes sense. I mean, if anybody was lurking under your house and you had a bunch of sharp sticks sticking through, or knives or blades or bolos or whatever else, that would be a definite hazard to anybody underneath the house, especially that naked husband. I don't know where he disappeared into this concept, but if I was a naked husband dancing around under the house, the last thing I'd want to do is encounter some knives. Anyway, and additionally, they say that sick people should not stay in houses with holes. They don't really tell us what a hole is. And they're told not to groan during their sickness or pain, because the groaning could attract an Aswang. Now, there are special anti-Aswang oils that can be developed. I'm not going to go into the recipes here. A lot of them come from the coconut, and of course, naturally, you would want to throw away the coconut after you rendered the meat and the milk into an oil. You'd want to throw that in the ocean so that the Aswang would not know who did it. Who made the oil, and of course, naturally, you would hang the oil at your door, and if an Aswang came near your door, the oil would begin to boil. So, if you notice the sack of oil hanging on your doorstep, or hanging next to your door, boiling, well, that would be a clue that there was an Aswang at your door. Obviously, if you hear scratching noises from the ceiling of a house, that's the sign of a nearby Aswang. Aswang in disguise can be detected by seeing if your reflection. I mentioned this already, that if your reflection is inverted in their eye. Additionally, if you see a dog or cat or a pig with no tail, those can be Aswangs in disguise. And of course, during holy masses, an Aswang, of course, would attempt to dodge the blessing of the priest. How do you kill an Aswang? Well, again, on this channel, I don't recommend doing this ever. But to kill a witch Aswang, the bolo knife can be used to strike the middle of the witch's back. Of course, if that area is not struck, but you struck another area, in like the chest or the arm or something else, the witch can lick its wounds and heal itself. Now, if you do manage to hit it in the middle of the back, the bolo that you used has to be planted underground. They don't recommend using guns because they don't work, and it's useless to stab and slash in an Aswang, of course, while it's in the form of an animal, because that's when it's in one of its strongest positions. You really only want to go after them, of course, during the day. For some reason, daylight tends to weaken pretty much every form of Aswang that's mentioned here. Of course, naturally, prayers can be used to make the Aswang vulnerable while it's in its helpless state. But either way, once it's dead, its body must be cut into pieces. If the Aswang is cut into 2 pieces, each piece must be separated and taken to opposite riverbanks and buried appropriately on opposite sides of the river. Now, where did these Aswang come from? In Philippine legends and lore, written accounts of Aswang date back to the Spanish explorers in the 16th century, if you can believe it. They noted the existence of these monsters, and they also noted that Aswang were very feared among the local population. Now, the rumor has it that This originated in the Bicol region. Um, Bicolanos believed in they believed in two particular gods, a good god and a bad god. That's unfortunate. The good god, his name was Gugurang, and he protected the people. He blessed the people. He took care of the people. He was a big benefactor for the region. He defended and guarded their homes, and he protected them against the evil god. And you will never guess what the name of the evil god was. The evil god's name was Aswang. Aswang was the name of the evil god. And of course, the evil god always tried to hurt people, destroy people, and he always, tried to do everything he could to sabotage the good god, Gugurang. And naturally, he was jealous because the people loved Gugurang and hated him. And of course, he was always shunned and cursed by the people in the Bicolano, in the Bicol region, the Bicolanos there. And naturally, he was always envious and always trying to one-up Gugurang. But he was so evil that naturally he never did manage to do anything that amounted to something somebody would enjoy having happen to them. And such is the thing with evil gods. The home of the Aswang, of course, is most commonly associated with the province of Capiz, which is on the island of Panay in the eastern Visayas. So much so, of course, that Capiz has come to be dubbed as the creature's hometown. And of course, many books, many movies, many documentaries, many stories. The Aswang are such a big part of Philippine legend and lore that you can't talk about the subject without bringing up the Aswang. In an April 29, 2019 documentary, Aswang were allegedly sighted in Himamaylan, Negros Oriental, which also lies in the western Visayas, where several residents have been reportedly terrorized by the appearance of the Aswang at night. And the team, which was known as KMJS, standing for Kapuso Mo Jessica Soho, that team tried to substantiate the claims of the residents by installing cameras, trail cameras, so forth and so on, around the area to capture the creature on film. But of course, they failed. They never did capture one on film. Anyway, the legends of the Aswang can be traced back to two possible sources. One, of course, you could say the behavior of the wildlife in the area. Of course, Aswang are wild behaving, of course, you could say that. But then there's also a more scientific explanation, which is the existence of X-linked dystonia Parkinsonianism within the region. Now, what is that? That's a genetic form of dystonia found among entirely males of Filipino descent in that particular region. Oddly as it may be, it's also known as the dystonia of Panay, due to the fact that the most current cases today can be traced back to the common ancestor in Panay. According to the recent studies, 93% of current cases of that particular disease happen on Panay Island, with 63% of those being in Capiz. So naturally, individuals diagnosed with that, they attribute that to the existence of Aswang in that area. Individuals who are diagnosed with that exhibit debilitating symptoms that put them in a transforming state, which results in their bodies twisting, their tongue protruding from their mouth, salivating. People with the disorder go through great suffering and pain, and of course, naturally, they say that they're under the influence or have been the victim of an Aswang. So it's a very sad situation for people with that particular ailment, as it would be. Now, as far as the influences of the Aswang in contemporary society, Maximo Ramos, back to him again, he lived from 1910 to 1988, And of course, naturally, he's an authority on the subject of Philippine lore. He focused on the ghoul aspect and the viscera sucker aspect of the Aswans. And he said that certain behaviors of modern day Filipinos can actually be traced back to older traditions and customs that were geared toward protecting themselves from the Aswang. Some of these contemporary behaviors, which still exist today, he mentions as point one. He mentions the vociferous nature of Filipino gatherings as compared to the solemn and subdued natures of other ethnic groups. He said this is most obvious when Filipinos meet with each other in non-Philippine settings. So I guess a group of Filipinos in another place or in another culture have a very vociferous nature in greeting themselves and having fun. He says point two is this: the floors, of course, naturally, if someone passes away in Philippine society, the floors are not swept while the dead is lying in state in that house. And I've actually noticed this here in the Philippines. I've been here for 20 years, and I've been to a couple of wakes, and I've noticed that they don't want to sweep the floors during the wake, and I never really understood why. But they said that sweeping the floor causes the scent of death to spread in the area and can attract the ghoul Aswang, which they don't want. So also they tend to do this, and I've never understood it. I've seen it happen once. A chicken, a jugular vein is cut and is tossed down the steps of the house. Yes, they cut the neck of the chicken and they throw it out. And it's allowed to flutter away and die, of course, if it bleeds out. And this causes the death to be carried out of the house. And of course, the chicken serves as a distraction to the ghoul Aswang. In some parts of Luzon, you'll also notice that orphans tend to wear red strips of cloth around their wrists, necks, or waist because red represents fire. And fire is a common countermeasure against the ghoul Aswangs, which can explain why peasant Filipinos prefer red clothing, which is seen in their dances and in their costumes. So you'll notice that in a lot of the traditional Philippine dances and performances, red is a prevalent color. The reason for this is because ghoul Aswangs have a great sense of smell and a great sense of hearing, but they don't have a great sense of vision. So the red tends to confuse them, and the red associates with fire. They stay away from fire, and so that's a way to avoid them. And of course, they say widows and widowers should not marry for at least a year after the spouse's death, because the Aswang might mistake the new spouse as the old dead spouse and come a-calling. And you don't want that. Also, phrases meant to identify that the speaker is not an Aswang and to announce one's presence to spirits are also common in the Philippines. So, if somebody's giving a speech and they have an interesting introduction, that could be a way to let people know that they are not an Aswang. And of course, this myth of Aswang and the legend of Aswang and the belief in Aswang has even been adopted in several other ways. For example, in the Philippines in the 1950s, the CIA was fighting the Huks, Huks. And they spread rumors. The CIA did this as a psyops operation. They spread rumors that evil men would be attacked by a local Aswang or vampire if they opposed the American efforts there. They then punctured. They of course naturally they found one of the dead Huks during one of their fights, and they punctured holes in the corpse and drained all of the blood from his body, and then took the body to be discovered on a road. And of course, naturally, the CIA, of course, the operatives there attributed this to the local Aswang. And of course, if you mess with us, you're messing with the local Aswang, and of course, naturally, you're going to end up on the side of the road, with full of holes. Colonel Edward Lansdale was likely among those who encouraged and spread the word of this practice as part of the psyops against the Huks. in the 1950s. So the legend of Aswangs goes back and goes back and goes back in film, in television, in literature, over and over and over again. And of course, naturally, there's a lot of research that you can do if you want to learn more about the Aswang, but suffice it to say, they're all evil, they're all no good, and that strange scratching you heard at your door the other night, well, you never know. So, I think that wraps it up, my friends, for our story on the Aswang. I appreciate it if you would like and subscribe to the channel. I think we're looking for our 20th subscriber now. I'm not sure YouTube gives an award for that. But I am David K, and I have been in the Philippines for over 20 years, and my Philippine experience has been nothing other than absolutely amazing. And I promise to bring you a video at least once a week. I try. I think this one took a little bit longer because I did a lot of research and I had a lot of reading to do. But I really, really wanted to capture the Aswang in one video. I hope it didn't take too long. I always try to make my videos rather short. I'm not into the 3-hour Joe Rogan type things, but I do appreciate a like and I do appreciate a subscribe. And I hope to see you again here on my 20-year Philippine experience. All the love.